Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be going through every game from the round 16 of the AFL season, going through each team where I think the game could be won and lost, where each team might be able to get an advantage over the other team, and then give my margin and show you the ladder at the end of the round and see where that leaves us for the end of the season. It's going to be a very interesting round. There should be some really good games, and it is kickstarted by Brisbane versus Melbourne. But before that, I'm just going to go through my tips from last week, as I actually did pretty well. I tipped Blues by 19. They ended up winning by 63, so got the correct call, but was a fair bit off in my margin. I don't think many people would have gotten it by that big of a distance. I tipped the Lions by just over 2 goals, and they ended up winning by 80 points. Also, I don't think many people would have tipped them to do that. I tipped the Swans to win by 7 in what I thought could have been a close game. And the Swans had a 10-goal lead at one stage. Giants brought it back down to 5 goals. I tipped the Demons by 2.5 goals, just under 3. And they ended up winning by 3. I thought North could push them, and they did in the end. They just couldn't quite get over the top. Then I tipped the Bombers by 23 points. I thought West Coast could challenge them, and they did. And they ended up winning by 30. And then I tipped Fremantle by 20 points. And they somehow ended up winning by 20 points. So that was pretty good. Also, before we get into it, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my channel, it would really help grow my channel and be able to give me more content to produce. Leave a like on the video as well if you enjoyed. And with that being said, let's get straight into the video. So the first game is between Brisbane and Melbourne up at the Gabba, and I think it will be a very interesting game. Melbourne coming off, as I mentioned earlier, the tough win against North Melbourne, where they had the game won essentially at three-quarter time, but unfortunately let North Melbourne back into the game and just held on right at the end. And then Brisbane coming off an absolutely demolishing game against Port Adelaide, where essentially from the start they just manhandled them and Port couldn't go with. It was a great win for them and looks to be getting their season back on track as they have performed really well in the last 7-8 weeks. And they can now push to potentially even make top four as they're only, 2 games away from that. And so by the end of the season, they could really get there. What could make or break this game is the scoring from both teams. Brisbane have been exceptional up forward in those last few weeks where they have turned around their season. Danaher and Hipwood have been exceptional. Hipwood, especially in probably career best form. He's been in the goals. And then their small forwards as well have been really good. Kai Lohman, bringing him in, has made a huge impact. It's gotten their energy up, and they've started to apply a lot of pressure, forcing teams to make errors. Charlie Cameron has been good. Probably not his best season so far, but still a very good season. Cam Rayner has been good. Logan Morris, the addition of him has really boosted as well. And then compare that to Melbourne, who have been probably one of the most dour scoring sides this season. They can't get any efficiency going forward. It's a lot of dump kicks. It's not efficient. It's not good to watch either. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see if Brisbane can slow them down as well as other teams have, and that can get them a big enough gap in the game. It's going to be an interesting midfield battle as well. Does Dunkley go to Oliver? Does Dunkley go to Viney? Does Berry go to Viney potentially even to try and lock Melbourne down? Does Trent Rivers get more midfield time as well? Who do they try and find as another solution? Because it worked for a little bit, but not for the entire game against North Melbourne, who did dominate them there. And so it's going to be interesting there. Oscar McInerney coming off his career best game as well. I think kicked 3 goals against Jordan Sweet in the ruck versus probably the best ruckman in the game right now, and Max Gawn. That's going to be another interesting matchup. But no, I don't have Melbourne winning by 55 points. It's probably going to be a Brisbane win simply based off of form. A lot of people are going to tip Brisbane, and I think I might as well. I just don't know what the margin's going to be. I could see them smack them realistically, simply based on form. But I also think Melbourne will want to come back and fight, and so that's why I'm sort of probably going to go for a margin about 14 points. Then we have North Melbourne versus the Bulldogs, two interesting teams. North Melbourne coming off that close loss to Melbourne, and then the Bulldogs coming off they're in fact coming off a bye, so they didn't actually play anyone. They had been all right, very inconsistent as always, but better, the Bulldogs before the bye. And I think they've got a couple players back now. They should have Norton and Darcy back, which is good for them. But I'm not a huge fan of it personally. Lobb has been all right, not anything crazy, but I just don't trust Norton, Newgall-Hagen, and Darcy as a front three together. I think Norton and Newgall-Hagen, you don't get the best out of them when they're playing together. But it's going to be tough for the North defence to be able to handle them. You've got Core, you've got Comben, you've got, I think, Callan Dawson's the other one. And so it'll be interesting to see who goes to who. I'd assume Core goes to Newgall-Hagen. But Comben, who I think has been pretty good this year, honestly, in a tough North Melbourne team, I think is actually a really good piece for the future, being moved down back. I think he maybe goes to Darcy and see if he can use a bit more of that strength that he has over him. I think that could be interesting. But again, the big one is obviously the midfield battle. LDU in the last few weeks has been spectacular. Sheasel has been moved a bit more forward off the halfback and has had some real impact. And then also Tom Powell's been very good. Jai Simpkin has been better than what he had to start the year, a lot more comfortable now, even though he's had some injury problems. Their midfield has been much better, and it's also going to be interesting, the more physical Tristan Cherry versus the more around the ground Tim English ruck battle. And so the obvious winner here is the Bulldogs, and I think they will get the job done. But given North has been a lot more competitive, it'll be interesting to see what the game sort of pans out like. But the Bulldogs should get it done by, let's say, 4 goals. Then have Sydney versus Fremantle at the SCG. Sydney coming off a good win against the Giants, where they were up by approximately 10 goals ish. I think it was 58 points. And then the Giants sort of clawed back a little bit and got it to under 5 goals. I think it was within 3 at one stage, but Sydney, they're just rolling. I don't think anyone can really stop them at the moment. They're really, really on top of the league. They've got a 3-game buffer and percentage of over, almost 150. I think they lost percentage from that win, which is nuts. And then Fremantle are coming off a good win against Gold Coast, but it's at the SCG. And Fremantle aren't great away from home. Sydney are the best team in the league. It's going to be interesting to see how they score against a very solid defense, even though it's more so how they set it up rather than how they win one-on-ones. It'll be interesting. Do Sydney use James Jordan against Jordan Clark? Maybe they do it against Luke Ryan, see if they can stop his influence. I preferably would go to Jordan Clark. I think if you can stop his run and dash, it completely slows down Fremantle's ball movement, and that probably would win Sydney the game. And so I believe they'll get the job done, and I think the margin could honestly blow up close to 30 points, and so I'll go by 28. We then have a very, very interesting game, in my opinion, and what could honestly be a make it or break it game for these two clubs. It's Gold Coast versus Collingwood up at Carrara Stadium, People's First, I believe it's actually called. And Gold Coast, with the Fremantle game, 20-point loss, still can't win away from home, but it's at home for them. And then Collingwood are coming off the bye, where they can get a reset, get some players back. I believe they've got Jordan Tagoe back now, and they can look to build off of this, and they've got a real good run of games. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a really strong Gold Coast backline against a sort of make-it-up Collingwood forward line. The midfield battle as well. Does Rao, Miller and Anderson get on top of a Collingwood midfield? It's going to be very interesting as well to see how Gold Coast go, because I'm not sure if Ben King is playing. He has dealt with a knee injury, and it doesn't look like he is. And so is Levi Casbolt, Jed Walter, potentially Ethan Reid going to be able to get a high enough score? And I don't think it is. So I think Collingwood are probably the favourites here. But it should be a close game, because there has been some close games between these two teams up there. It's also going to be a sold-out crowd, which is interesting, but it's obviously Collingwood. They always get good crowds, and so I think it'll be a margin of about, say, 10 points, because it is normally a good game between these two sides. Then on the Saturday night, there's a game between Geelong and Essendon in what seems to be another interesting game. Geelong coming off an absolute demolition, where they got smacked from pillar to post by Carlton, and Essendon are coming off a 5-goal, but was a relatively close win over West Coast, where they sort of kept Eagles in the game a little bit, and then just sort of got the margin out to a good margin by the end of it. This is going to be an interesting game, because Patrick Dangerfield is available, but there's going to be no Tom Hawkins for the Cats 4 goals out of 800 goals, I believe. So a bit of a disappointing afternoon for them. But as you can see, Geelong are already out of the 8, and they started 7-0. So they've been 1-6 in their last 8 weeks, because you include the bye. And it seems to be that their season has already started to fade very early, earlier than a lot of people would have expected. I personally wasn't a huge fan of Geelong anyway at the start of the season, and I got a bit proven wrong. But then they've started to show in what I believe is their true colours. I don't know how they're going to perform this game. It's at the MCG as well, so it's a wider venue, harder for them to defend the ground, which is where they want to go. And Tom Stewart, I think, is going to be able to, well, not going to be able to, but going to be a huge piece to see if they can get the win. It'll be interesting to see if they put someone like a Sam Durham on him, although I believe he might go to Max Holmes, who's that more damaging player. But his move into the midfield hasn't really affected too many things for them inside. And Tom Stewart's fall off has completely disconnected their backline, because they just allow scores very easily now. I think they've allowed 5 over 100 scores this year, which is just not Geelong like. But for Essendon, they were able to get their forward line back on track a little bit. They're still in the top 4, and it'll be interesting to see if they can hold on by the end of the season. Personally, I don't think so, but this game could be a huge game for them if they want to stay in there. They'll need to win it if they want to stay up in the top 4, but I think they will. I think Jake Stringer could have a huge game. He was very good against West Coast, and there's not a real genuine matchup for him. College Asney's not really playing very well at the moment. And I also think that their backline has been very good. And without Tom Hawkins, there's not going to be too many damaging players outside of Cameron and Stengel, because Myers, Close, Ollie Dempsey have really dropped off in the last few weeks. So Essendon should get this win. It's not going to be a 60-point win like it was. Essendon don't really do that to the decent teams. So I think it's going to be a 3-goal game. We then have Adelaide versus GWS to kick off the Sunday games. Adelaide are coming off the bye. GWS coming off a 4.5-goal loss to Sydney. That probably could have been more. And I think this is an interesting game. It's Adelaide don't have Taylor Walker, I believe. I might correct me on that in the comments below. But they do have Rankin back, and that's huge for them. He's so important to their midfield, being able to provide something different to what they have with Crouch, who's no longer playing, but Laird, Berry, Dawson, who hasn't been at his most damaging as he was last year. They need him. He's really important. They've also decided to go with Kieran Strachan over Riley O'Brien, which is interesting. I'm not a huge fan of it. Versus Kieran Briggs, who just hasn't been up to his standards that he started last year, which I sort of predicted at the start of the year. But it's going to be interesting. Giants look to be back against Port Adelaide, but coming up against the best team in Sydney, not much you can really do. And I think they will be favourites absolutely into this game, and they should be looking to end Adelaide's season if it's not already finished, which probably is. It'll be interesting. I think Toby Green could have a huge game. I think you can book him in for at least 3 goals. But outside of that, I don't think there's too much to really say. Should get the win by, let's say, over 4 goals. We then have St Kilda versus Port Adelaide at Marvel. The Saints coming off the bye, Port coming off a demolition versus Brisbane. And Port, you could easily make the argument they are the most under pressure team coming into this round. Their form has just completely dropped off. They can't score, they can't defend. Radaglia and Zerk Thatcher are proving to be just C-grade pickups, really. Soldo has picked up a knee injury, and they've had to use Jordan Sweet, who's not their number one option, and he got absolutely monstered by McInerney, so him coming up against Marshall is not going to be easy. Butters and Rosie have definitely not been at their best. Butters has been tagged a lot more, and Rosie's just coming off an injury, so he's going to take his time to get back. Dixon and Finlayson have not been looking good. Dixon has obviously had some injury struggles, and they've had to rest him. Finlayson just doesn't look like a football player at times, which is very weird. And they're coming up against the Saints team that they've just been shit. They've played one good attacking game all year, and that was against Brisbane, where they lost. And so there's going to be no Dougal Howard, and so maybe play Charlie Dixon, see if you can get that physical edge, because he normally towers over us every game. But outside of that, It'll be weird. I don't think this is a real game anybody wants to watch by any means, and there's just a lot of pressure on Port Adelaide. But where do I think the game will be won and lost? Honestly, I have no idea. And this is coming from a Saints fan. I don't like this game. I think we can definitely win, being the Saints. But I also think Port Adelaide will bounce back and will really show their hand and will have to pull something out. They've still got a good midfield. Still got Drew. They've still got Wine. Still got Butters, Rosé, Horn-Francis. Speaking of Horn-Francis, if they want to win, he needs to be the one in this game who does it for them. But I'm actually going to go to the upset here, if you can even classify it, and I'll go St Kilda. There is a stat, though, that Port Adelaide have won 13 out of 14 games against the Saints. And so it's probably an upset, and I'm tipping Saints by 11 points because I am biased at times. So, yeah. And then we have Richmond versus Carlton. It's an interesting game, most definitely. It's Richmond coming off, I believe, a bye. Yes, that is correct. And Carlton coming off a dubbing against Geelong. 63 points in the end, which is crazy. They got absolutely scored efficiency on the board in the last quarter. Everything they had from the midfield turned into a score. Kerno was magnificent. Mackay was great. Owies fantastic. I think everything went right for Carlton in that game. And Richmond, yes, they have a bye, but Lynch isn't going to be available. And so they're not going to really have any scoring options. You don't have Lynch. You don't have Lafau. You don't have many attacking options outside of your Smalls and Bolton and Dusty. And so it's going to be tough for them to score against a very informed Carlton backline. And then their defense as well is going to really, really struggle against the Carlton forward line with a purely amazing Charlie Kerno and a very informed Harry Mackay. And so could this get out to a huge margin? Yes, I think so, and I think it will. Even though it's a Richmond home game, they still haven't shown to be able to consistently be in games, and I think that's why the margin could blow out to probably 40 points. Then in the last game of the round, it's West Coast versus Hawthorn. West Coast are coming off the 5-goal loss to the Dons, and then Hawthorn are coming off the bye. They probably needed it because they want to get Mitch Lewis back. It'll help bring them some more creativity in that forward line, along with the smalls that they already have. Mabior Chol has been in some very good form, and that has really helped propel them into close to top 8 contention. They're 13th at the moment, and with this win outside of percentage, they could almost climb up to top 8 already, which is huge for them. And so their midfield will be able to get to work against this Eagles, although Harley Reid is back, which is a huge talking point. He could absolutely monster this game. I think it'll be interesting to see if they put a Connor Nash to him, see if you can sort of quell his influence, because it is a lot. But also it is at West Coast, and I think that gives the Eagles a couple of goals in advantage. And so it'll be very interesting. The ruck battle as well. Lloyd Meek has been very, very good. He's turned his career around a little bit this year, coming up against Matt Flynn and Bailey Williams, who are two good players, but nothing crazy. Also, McGovern and Barras have been exceptional this year. Were very good against Essendon and sort of kept them in the game. And so can Hawthorn get in front of them? Yes, I think they'll be a bit more exciting. But I'm actually going to go the upset here as well. I think West Coast can get this win. The impact of Reid coming back, they're at home. Hawthorn have come off a bye at a really, I think, poor time you could make, because they want to ride that wave of momentum, keep things going, and I think it could impact them a little bit. And I think West Coast can get this win. Will it be a close game? Probably. But I think the Eagles can get the win by 7 points, and that actually finishes the round. So please like the video if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button to this channel as well. It'll really help push this video in the YouTube algorithm. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about who you might think will win all the games. And thanks for watching.